Hello, I'm author Bob Pierce, and welcome to the studio. In this video, we're going to start talking about character development. This will be part one, and we're going to show you in these videos how to flesh out your characters. In previous videos, we've talked about defining your main characters, giving them names, fabricating backstories, and writing a small bio about each one of them. One of the things to keep in mind as you go through this is the same credo that I keep bringing up. It's all about the story. The characters facilitate the story, not the other way around. Although the contents of the story will reveal more about each of the character as it goes along. In the book Lilith, there's a quote on the back from Jack Walsh, one of the main characters, kind of illustrates how that works. While plumbing the depths of the world's most proliferate and most wanted contract killer, probing deep into her soul and her psyche to seek out any shards of humanity to help tell her story, I found myself relating and inadvertently discovered my own. A frightening and at times horrifying process, and the most introspective and life-changing experience of my life. That by the main character, Jack Walsh. Kind of gives you an insight into how that sort of thing will develop. The writers group that I belong to once made a comment to me as we were sharing some of our work with each other. They said, it's like you all sit around the dinner table together. You know each one of them so intimately. Well, that's the goal, to know each of your characters that intimately. Now, one of the things to remind yourself as you go along is to avoid bogging down the story with a lot of lengthy descriptions. This just kills the pace of your book. For your main characters, when you first introduce them at the early part of the book, you want to give a little short paragraph about them, maybe describe them just a little bit, but just the main things about them. Are they tall? Are they short? Are they old? Are they young? Things like that. Secondary characters, just hit some of the highlights, just to give people a little bit of a picture of them to start off with. Throughout the rest of the book, you'll reveal more and more about each character through conversations and adjectives that you'll pepper into the conversations and the narrative as you go along. Things like, the tall man replied, and then his reply, but that gives another little bit of information about that particular character. So flabby and out of shape, I feared David would fall behind. Jack Walsh's assistant in Lilith, as they were being chased at one point. We are constantly reminded that David is a bit of a glom, if you will. Anyway, you want to leave some of the image of your characters to the reader's imagination. Reveal what's necessary to further the story, but don't give away too much. Though still, for some of the characters, especially your main characters, that's still a lot that you're going to tell them, but in little pieces as you go along. Now, as you work up your characters, fleshing them out as you go through each draft of the book, you want to remember a couple of fundamental things about people in general. The good guys aren't necessarily always entirely good. Each has some sort of flaw, and most of them have some kind of secrets. And you know them so well. You can give little hints of this stuff as you flesh the characters out through the book. Bad guys, at the same time, aren't necessarily all bad. Each is looking for redemption or justice until ultimately, in some cases, they give up on it. Lilith, for example, she is seeking understanding and reconciliation before ultimately surrendering to justice, the end. And that's kind of where Jack goes along with her changing attitudes from the beginning of the book to the end of the book and how they affect him. So your main characters is another little tip to keep in mind. Because your story is going to be dialogue intensive, and we'll talk about dialogue itself in part 2, your main characters need a foil, a sidekick, if you will. Somebody to converse with, somebody to bounce ideas off of, so that you have some sort of a mechanism to keep these conversations going as you keep unfolding the story through their eyes and what they're talking about. And bear in mind movies, the way they're done. As you're writing this, movies, they have to keep it tight and keep it moving, or else they get like 2% Rotten Tomatoes or something. They might as well just say, this movie stinks, don't bother. Well, anyway, you get the idea. A boring book is a book that never gets read, and usually word gets around, so it never gets sold either. So that's it for part 1. Just remember a few of the basic points that you need to give your characters dimension and use them as you go along in the writing process to tell the story. And don't rely so much on narrative. I mean, there's got to be a good balance of the two to keep it moving the whole time. In part 2, we'll talk about discussion and dialogue and how to make that work, how to construct it, and how to keep it interesting, basically. And that's the important part. Keep your readers engaged. So till then, I'm Bob Pierce from the studio.